This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 59.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba. Ramsey is always confused. Is it a SE or an SE? Maybe you guys can help him out. Enjoy the show.
Hello, SE Nation. Welcome back to another episode. I wanted to talk about this thing where I wanted to talk about dealing with people. Dealing with people is not easy. I think it's the hardest part of sales engineering. People don't always do what you want them to do. They want to do what they want to do. Big surprise. The customers also ask tough questions. I mean, even my son asks me tough questions. A lot of times I just feel like he's mocking me. I digress. And they're demanding. They want what they're paying for, or even sometimes a little bit more. That's why most engineers prefer to work with computers or routers or software, because they can make the software do what they want it to do. And if you're in support and the computer or the router is not doing what you want it to do, you can always reboot it. If that doesn't work, you can shake it really hard. That never works. But I've tried it and it never worked. But it was cathartic. Let's just say that. You can do that with people. You can shake them really hard. You can smack them on the back of the head if you're Jethro Gibbs from NCIS, but that's not real life. So don't hit anybody. And it never ends up getting them to do what you want them to do. But as sales engineers, we are paid to work with people. That's the hardest part of our job, in my opinion. That usually means that we're uncomfortable. And if you're comfortable you might be comfortable being a sales engineer, but if you're just comfortable all the time as a sales engineer, that means there's a part missing in your career, in your job. Either you're not seeing enough customers, or not doing enough demos, or not solving enough problems. So, you could be comfortable being uncomfortable. That just means you're uncomfortable by default and you don't notice it anymore. And before we go on, I wanted to do something uncomfortable for me for this website and this podcast. I've been talking to a few people. I've reached out to a few people on the email list, and I want to talk to more people. So what I'm going to do for the month of June, and this is coming out on June 3rd. So for the entire month of June, anyone who signs up to the podcast, I will reach out to, not to the podcast, anyone who signs up to the newsletter, I will reach out to just to have a discussion about what you guys need, want, what you're looking for out of this website. This website is made for you. I'm making it, but I'm not making it for me, although there is a part of that. But if it doesn't help other people as well, then there is no point. I can just have it private and not do anything about it. Sign up and I will reach out to you as soon as possible. Let's get into the meat of the show. There are many situations where we're going to feel uncomfortable, and I want to talk about those situations. I'm going to list them here, and the point is not say that it's okay. Well, the point is to say that many people are facing the same situations. At least I am. So if you're uncomfortable in these situations, it is normal. It is not a bad thing. You're supposed to be uncomfortable in these situations. Initially, when we're new sales engineers, we might be uncomfortable reaching out to customers to set up meetings. And as we get more experienced as sales engineers, it might be uncomfortable to reach out to new possible customers to set up experience. And some people say that that's a sales guy's job, but not really. We can do that as well. And it could be uncomfortable for many reasons, even with the customers that you already know. It could be that you and the customer don't see eye to eye, as in you don't have to like every customer that you work with. If you like every customer that you work with, you're lucky. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people. They just want things differently. For example, some of my customers want to pay $0 and get pretty much everything that they wanted in a feature, which is impossible. And trying to explain that to them sometimes falls on deaf ears. So you don't see eye to eye, you don't want to face that customer, you don't want to talk to him, and which makes you not want to reach out. But it's always important to do that just to keep that relationship going. It could be that you think that the customer is busy, which is sometimes the case, and you don't want to bug them. And I face that all the time. It's like, hey, should I reach out to this guy? I don't want to bug him. Like, he might be busy doing this, but we'll never know until we reach out. And if you're not reaching out in a high frequency to the point where you are going to bug them, like once a day, you're not going to bug them. They can easily ignore your email. If you call them, they don't have to answer. If you leave a message, they don't even have to listen to the message. But it's a good thing to reach out to them every once in a while. If you have a list of all your customers, you can just do like a weekly top 3 and reach out to 3 other than the people that you already have meetings with. It could be that you don't want to talk to customers because whenever you talk to a specific customer, you end up with like a three days worth of work that will not amount to any sales. And that happens a lot, at least with me. And I'll talk about dealing with that in a bit. Another uncomfortable situation is telling the customer that they are wrong. And that comes back to that first part where if you talk to a customer, you end up with work worth 3 days of useless stuff. How can you tell the customer that this is not worth your time without actually saying those words? And the big thing is the customer is not always right. I repeat, the customer is not always right. If they were always right, they would not need sales engineers. They would just go on the website and buy whatever it is that they need to buy and move on. The customer is generally very good at what they are doing in that piece of that world. Sales engineers, especially generalist sales engineers, have a broader view of everything, and they can provide insight to the customer and help educate the customer, teach the customer about different things, which means that the customer is not always right. And it's our job to be the trusted advisor, as John Kerr would say. Check out his book if you haven't done. It's the SE Bible, Mastering Technical Sales. So check that out and be a trusted advisor, telling the customer they are wrong. Maybe don't use those words, but try to ask questions to show them that they're wrong, or just have a good comment that will help them realize that they're wrong. And that's an uncomfortable situation. You know, an uncomfortable situation for me specifically is working with customers who know more than I do, which happens all the time. And I consider myself a good SE, but many of my customers know more than I do. And I know other domains, like if you're selling molecular 3D imaging software, I don't know if that exists, but that's an example. and you're working with a molecular biologist, well, guess what? I can't even say that word. Molecular biologist knows a lot more about the molecules than you do. And they're going to ask questions. Can you see this part of the molecule, or can you see that part of the molecule? I don't even know if that makes sense, but they're going to go into details which you will not have the answer to right away. It's an uncomfortable situation, especially when you're sitting there and telling the customer 3 or 4 times in a row, like, yeah, I'll look into that. I will look into that. I will look into that. Doesn't always feel good. And if you're selling more than just an imaging software or modeling software, you're selling 5 or 6 different products, and the molecular biologist is using that modeling software on a daily basis, well, guess what? They're going to know a lot more about their part of that software than you will, because they're using it on a daily basis. Whereas you're selling 4 or 5 different products, which means you're not going to get in depth into every single one of them. So now you're talking to someone who knows the technology more than you and knows the product more than you, at least a portion of the product more than you, the portion that they're interested in. Not a fun feeling. It is uncomfortable. Live with it. I had a conversation with a gentleman earlier about this situation, whereas he's asking, like, when I go to a demo, and I did the discovery, I went to the demo, and then when I'm doing the demo, they started asking me, can you support this? Can you support that? And it wasn't part of the discovery because there's so many aspects that we could cover, and I wasn't prepared for that. How can I overcome that? Well, the solution that we came up with while doing our chat is, if you have a champion in that team that you're going to do the demo for, what I did, I found a champion and I scheduled a pre-demo demo to that specific individual ahead of time, like a couple of days before the demo was due. And then I ran through the demo for this person, and I asked him to let me know what else they want to know. What are the possible questions that they can ask me, so that I can prepare for them. I didn't have to exactly show them the answers before they asked, but at least I'd have answers to their questions when they asked. Next on the list is my favorite, telling account managers that they are wrong. So I've worked with almost 4 account managers. They weren't directly my account managers. Maybe 3 are my account managers. And out of the 4 that I've worked with, 1 is horrible, and 1 or 2 or 3 are great or good, as in they are, in my mind, they take feedback. But 1 was horrible, and that was the person I enjoyed telling that they're wrong the most. The problem is when you have to do that in front of customers. And telling the account manager they're wrong in front of customers, although it could be fun, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't show your company in a good light. So it's an uncomfortable situation, trying to figure out how to say to the customer that what the account manager is saying is false without making it sound like that. So just thinking of different wording, asking questions to that account manager, hey, you sure about that? Because I heard this or that, or saying, actually, this is the way it works, not the way you're saying. It's a little bit of it's a slight difference, but it makes a big difference to the customer. So I just wanted to clarify stuff like that. And it's different from account manager to an account manager. So if the account manager is saying something that's blatantly false and they know it, just in an effort to sell to the customer, that's one thing. And that should be dealt swiftly, and make sure that the customer knows that they're wrong, and take it up to their superiors if you think that they're doing it on purpose. There are some account managers who just don't know the technology, and they're just saying false things, but they think they're true. You still have to correct that, but at least it's not malicious. And if they're at the start of their career with that company, that means they're just learning. If they're like If they've been there for 5 years and they still don't know, that's a different problem that also needs to be dealt with. The biggest thing that I talk to SEs about has nothing to do with the customer or correcting the account manager in front of the customer. Is when the account manager thinks that the opportunity is qualified, but they actually haven't qualified it, and then they ask you to fly across the country to meet the customer. And I've talked to few SEs, and that comes up quite a bit. The solution that we came up with, again, was to have, for the SE to have qualifying questions to the account manager. So if you can't ask those qualifying questions to the customer directly, you need to ask them to the account manager. And if the account manager doesn't have an answer for those, then you don't need to jump on a plane and fly halfway across the country. And that means the account manager has to go back and get answers to those questions before you go, which saves everybody a lot of time and money, including the company that you work for. Next, asking for something from the customer. So when we did the solution selling training as part of my previous company, they said don't give something to the customer without asking for something in return. So if the customer wants information about the product, ask for a meeting with the higher up. It doesn't always work, but the point is that we can ask the customers for stuff just as much as they can ask us. Because customers ask us for things all the time, whether they're current customers or potential customers. They ask us for demo license, configuration assistance, support, whatever. So why is it hard for us to ask for something back? Or in general, I like to ask for something back, and when I ask for something back, it's also a win-win, or at least I try to make it a win-win. My favorite request is I ask if the customer asks me to come in for help. I love it. I go in and help. If they ask me for something else, I always say hey, I'm gonna give this to you. Do me a favor. Next time you're trying to use the product and you can't figure something out, please call me before you try to find alternatives. And this keeps them using my product, which is a good thing, and also saves them time by getting expert help on the spot. And they learn the product, so next time they don't need me as much. And I would say that's a win-win. Other things you can ask for are introductions to other people, leads, because there are different kinds of leads. There are leads that account managers usually follow up on, at least in my opinion, are from new customers somewhere else, a new company, a new logo, as they would call it. But the leads that I like to follow up on are, let's say I'm working with Verizon Wireless, and there are multiple teams within Verizon Wireless. I'm working with Team A, and if they tell me about a lead in Team B, I would follow up on that. I would go and talk to Team B, mainly because I have access. If you don't have access, try to get one. And also I have the relationship, and I'm the expert, which is better for me to reach out to than the account manager. So asking for something in return for a favor that you're doing to the customer should not be a bad thing. And I think a lot of SEs are actually good at that. But for beginner SEs, this might be uncomfortable, or it might not be something that you thought of. Uncomfortable situation number, I'm not even counting. So doing a demo. So doing a demo is stressful and fun. It's when I used to play basketball, back in high school or a little bit back in university. Before every game, I would get butterflies, and I just want to go out there and play. And maybe it's uncomfortable, maybe it's stress, maybe it's excitement, whatever. I knew I was prepared. Same with the demo. And I knew I was going to go out and play my best game ever. Sometimes I was right. Sometimes it was a blowout. And same thing happens to at least has happened to me as a sales engineer. I've had some great demos and I've had some horrible demos. And not because I did not prepare, but for example, I had to demo the newest hardware module to a customer, and that hardware module is capable of 400 gigs of traffic. Just to give you an idea, if you're not in networking, my internet speed is around 30 megabytes per second upload. So one is a mega, the other one's 400 giga. Like, there's a big difference. I couldn't even do the math. Not because it's hard, just because I didn't want to. But it's a brand new box, brand new piece of equipment, and I had to pack it up and take it to the customer. It was working in my lab, and then I drove 5 minutes to the customer site, made sure it's all ESD safe and everything. Turned it on at the customer site, and nothing happened. It didn't turn on. It just wasn't working, and it was a horrible experience trying to figure out. My account manager spent 10 minutes distracting the customer, saying, hey, we're in their lab asking, what's this? What's that? What's this? Have you heard of the game yesterday? We're hockey fans up here. Well, most people are hockey fans up here, so you can talk about hockey for 15 minutes easy. I couldn't get it up. That sounded wrong. Okay, I couldn't get it working. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get it working. And it was a horrible demo. Packed it up and left. Suffice to say, we didn't get the deal. Went back to the office and I debugged it and figured it out. And I was able to turn on the box. So stuff like that happens. It's an uncomfortable situation because you don't know if things are going to go horribly wrong. But sometimes they go great. So we don't know. It's a surprise. All right, next. The funnest time for me is sitting with a customer for half hour and getting bashed about how crappy my product is. And this has happened in multiple companies that I've worked for. Although the product is good, some customers, for example, when I worked at Alcatel-Lucent, some customers loved Cisco, and they would just bash Alcatel-Lucent, even though at that point I wasn't in pre-sales, I was in post-sales, which means they already bought. They would go and bash it. Same with the new companies that I've worked for as a sales engineer. You just sit there and take it. And you're trying to keep your cool. You can try to defend your product, but if they're at the point where they're just bashing nonstop, then there's no point. Maybe they just let the customer release all that anxiety he's had for a while. And it could happen to anyone. It could even if you have the greatest product in the world. If one customer doesn't like it, he might bash you. Uncomfortable, but you deal with it. In the end, we end up selling to that customer again. It's not like we never sold to that guy again. He just wanted to release stress, I guess. And we helped him do that. It was not a fun time for me, but we got it done. And we were able to sell again. My most uncomfortable situation is meeting with gatekeepers. Now, there are some good gatekeepers and bad gatekeepers. Good gatekeepers who know what they're trying to solve, and bad gatekeepers who are just like, you have to meet this guy before you meet the rest of the team, but he doesn't actually know what the team does. So what's he gatekeeping for? He doesn't know what we can sell, what problems his colleagues behind him are trying to solve. So trying to sell products or solutions to this guy is kind of useless. For gatekeepers, I've always found that as a relationship thing. So, and depending on the gatekeeper, sometimes I'd ask my account manager to build that relationship and leave me out of it, because it's uncomfortable. Going back to the first couple, sometimes it's uncomfortable talking with customers because you don't see eye to eye. And then we're down to the last two. Getting urgent calls from customers. Personally, as a pre-sales engineer, I like to be proactive. I have my time structured. I'm doing this at this time, this at this time. I have this time open for emergencies or whatever. But it is structured. and then you get an urgent call from a customer saying like, hey, I have a demo to my customer and I need to use your equipment to show my equipment, as an example. So I need help right now because nothing is working. And then you have to drop everything and go. You'd be back in the same situation where you're doing a demo, but you actually don't have anything prepared. So you're just going on site and figuring it out as you're working along, and they're standing behind you, looking over your shoulder, trying to get you going because they need your equipment to work to show their customers their equipment, so on and so forth. Or let's say you're networking and a router goes down and you get the first call instead of support, and you're trying to guide the customer to call support or calling support on their behalf, and you're the in-between guy. So you're going to be uncomfortable. Last one I have on the list is some SEs that I know that I'm friends with have a hard time asking for help, which means they end up working around the clock trying to figure stuff out or trying to work on a demo. I worked with a director or VP of sales, and he once told me the best sales teams are those who know how to leverage other people. So if you're a sales engineer and you're working around the clock, first off, in my opinion, you're working to live, not living to work. And if you have a family, you might want to consider asking for help. And it's not a bad thing. Sales engineers get paid a high portion of their salary as a base, which means we're more employees than entrepreneurs. Salespeople are 50-50, so they're 50 employees, 50 entrepreneurs, or 60-40, whatever it is that you guys get paid, that sales guys get paid. So they're lone wolves, they're trying to sell their own stuff. But as sales engineers, it is our duty to help other sales engineers. At least that's what I think. And from the people that I've talked to on the podcast, outside the podcast, sales engineers love to help. I don't know why, but that's a common trait that I found between sales engineers. They enjoy helping other people, whether it's customers or sales engineers. There's one show with the gentleman from Cisco. We talked about mentoring and menteeing. I'm not even going to link it because the audio is so bad, so don't listen to it. But sales engineers love to mentor other sales engineers. So ask for help. It's an uncomfortable situation. Ask for help. Please ask for help so that you can maintain your sanity. And so, in conclusion, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're a sales engineer. You work with technology and you work with customers. Technology might be finicky and may not always work. For example, my 400 gig device that didn't turn on in front of the customer. And customers are also finicky, that they want things the way they want it, and sometimes they don't want to listen. You're going to find yourself in multiple different situations where you're uncomfortable. That just means you're facing new situations. You're learning from them. They're experiences. So for example, for the 400 gig situation where I went to the customer site and it didn't work, what I would do right now is take that 400 gig device the day before and turn it on at the customer site and leave it on. Because if the customer wasn't looking over my shoulder, I would have been able to just turn it on and get it working. I didn't really have to do much. It wasn't difficult to bring it back on. But doing it in front of a customer, it's a different situation than doing it in your lab or with no one looking behind you. So go early. Figure out ways to get comfortable in the situations where you're uncomfortable, and then find other situations where you're uncomfortable in and learn from those. All right, enough with my rant. So remember, for the month of June, anyone who signs up to the newsletter, I'm going to reach out to set up a time to chat, because I want this podcast and the website to be the best possible SE resource. And it's an uncomfortable situation for me, but I'm going to do it because that's what needs to be done. If you like this podcast, this episode, or any of the other episodes, share, subscribe to the podcast, and if you haven't left a review, I know I'm like I have close to 2,000 downloads this month for this podcast, and I only have 11 reviews or 12 reviews. I just got one recently, and I appreciate that. Please leave a review. It will help other sales engineers in our situation to see it, find it, and learn from it. And I've heard stories about sales engineers just listening to the podcast, and it's helped them find a job. I'm working with others to help them get a sales engineering job, but people have just listened to the podcast and got a job as a sales engineer. So it's been useful to some. Try to help others by letting them know about this. I appreciate you guys. And with that, this is Ramsey signing off.